It's the Josh and Josh Talk Wrestling Podcast with your host, Josh. And with me, as always, the best podcast co-host there is, the best podcast co-host there was, and the best podcast co-host there ever will be. Josh, how are you doing, my friend?
What up, peeps? What up, Josh? Oh, my gosh. That was again, quite the intro. Personally, I think I'm overrated. Anyone that knows me personally, they're like, yeah, Josh is a bit overrated. But, hey, I really appreciated that intro.
Hey, nothing but the best, boss, man.
Hey, it's WrestleMania season. This is my favorite time of the wrestling year. This is the culmination of so many efforts from a lot of different levels of wrestling. You have to think about everyone that's on the WrestleMania card. A lot of them came from the independent circuits, probably wrestling programs in your own backyard. Mm-hmm. And some of these people did just start in the NXT developmental program, but even then, or FCW or OVW, what have you. But even then, that very much was somewhat of a developmental deal. It's an independent type circuit feel. Bottom line, there's a lot of workers that are going to be getting an awesome opportunity coming up in just 2 weeks to have this large forum known as WrestleMania, and I'm excited for it. Doesn't always play out necessarily like I want it to, but for the workers that have, the workers that have sacrificed, as far as all the blood, sweat, and tears over the years, kudos to them. It's gonna be a lot of fun for us, and yeah, WrestleMania is I'm always excited about it. It's my favorite time of the wrestling year.
The road to WrestleMania. It's I don't get into Christmas really much anymore or anything like that, but I do kind of I get a little hyped up. I get on the hype train a little bit for WrestleMania. I call myself a smark, but it's hard not to get excited for all the hoopla, all the excitement, because there's always something. Even the worst WrestleManias, even the worst ones have something you can maybe point to. Even WrestleMania 9 had Bobby Heenan on a camel.
Right. Well, in WrestleMania in itself, it's kind of like the stock market. It moves the product of wrestling. Yeah. It moves everything forward. Like Monday Night Raw, I always think of as this gear or this spoke on like a clock, and it's just going, turning it for another revolution.
It's the culmination,
Right, the culmination, and then of course it's setting up for the next year to come. So, but yeah, we're going to talk more about WrestleMania here in a bit. We actually got some messages in the hot box again. Thank you so much. Great question. It was about ECW, right?
We were asked to maybe envision the return of ECW.
Yeah, no. So thanks again for your hot box suggestion. Josh and Josh Talk Wrestling at gmail.com. I think the idea was that we're pitching the return of ECW format, roster, key figures, etc. The type of fantasy booking promotion style. Personally, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it.
Okay.
I wouldn't do it. And this is where I definitely agree with Vince McMahon on this. It's one thing to have these hardcore, these extreme matches once in a while or like on a pay-per-view, but to do it every night, it's just not sustainable. People are products. And I know I sound like Negan from Walking Dead here, but people are products at the end of the day, and the lifespan of a wrestler already isn't that long. And especially in a WWE world, you cannot have that type of style wrestling every single night. So for me, it wouldn't make sense to have an extreme brand, so to speak. But I guess what I would do is if I'm bringing ECW back, maybe I would do something like what they sort of did, maybe a WWECW situation, but I wouldn't call it ECW. In fact, I'd probably call it something like 205 or NXT, which I think we're kind of seeing that. So we're sort of seeing that different type of style wrestling. I don't know. What do you think, Josh?
Wow. I got to tell you, I am surprised by your answer. It makes sense. I get what you're saying. You're kind of saying that like the wrestlers might get burned out too quickly from just taking, theoretically chair shots and everything to the head. Is that what you're saying?
We're talking like real ECW stuff. If that's the thing, like, I mean, I know that we see our street matches and our no holds barred, but for the most part, and wrestlers are still getting hurt, but these are a lot tamer than they were 20 years ago in ECW.
They
just are. And again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's actually probably the way we should go. Yeah. And it's actually why a lot of people, fans love Mick Foley for the whole Hell in a Cell. Wrestlers probably in a way don't like him because he set the bar so high. I mean, how are you going to top that? He went through, essentially fell twice through the steel cage and off the steel cage. How are you going to top that?
They've been trying. We've seen it.
I don't even know if they've been trying. I think they've been trying to make it tamer because I think they're trying to lower that standard again. Could you imagine that at some point someone's going to die if you keep trying to top that? Yeah, no, I will sort of throw in there like if I were to book it, but initially saying, nah, I wouldn't come back with a theme. But I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I could definitely understand that. I went in a different direction. I went ahead and, imagined that we booked it because I feel like there still is a market for this. And if handled slightly differently, like, see, if you don't treat it like a regular WWE product and you rotate the roster out, you mix it up a little bit more, I think it can be successful. So the idea I had for it was you start with 3 one-night stands. You bring one one night stand back. You start with 3 specials on the WWE Network exclusively. Do these all 3 at the Hammerstein Ballroom. Keep it as close to the 2005 one night stand as you can, in terms of presentation and format, but you of course want to modernize it. You don't want to rely too heavily on nostalgia. And so, it's a lot of this but this. So let's say we can do that. You schedule these in empty spots throughout the pay-per-view schedule throughout the year, so it's not competing with anything else. And then you see if that's successful. If it is, you do a weekly show, network exclusive. You keep it lo-fi style for the sets, minimal WWE branding, similar to NXT, to give it that down low look. Try different types of camera work. The same quality level as WWE, of course. You don't want to go back to what hardcore TV looked like in those days. That was bad news.
Or do you? Because it was extreme. That type of mustiness, that type of cloudiness, every time you watch like a WCW or ECW show, or even the Attitude Era, I always felt like it was just constant, like, fog machine just got done rolling out, and now they're starting their match.
Or
that's
just like everybody was smoking in the audience or something. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Sorry.
I get that, and I'm with that, but I don't know. Me personally, that I'm always going to opt for better video quality. So I don't know. Maybe you can see the blood better. I don't know.
Okay.
That's just me personally. So I'm saying keep that level of production quality, but try it differently. Don't maybe don't zoom in every time somebody gets hit with a chair. Or, don't bounce the camera up and down when people are getting like hit in the back or something like they do with a kendo stick or something. Make it a little less cheesy like WWE is with its very homogenized production. So like what I'm saying is high quality but just gritty.
And just to clarify then, Josh, would this be your idea of ECW? Would this be on the same level of brand as like Raw and SmackDown, or would it be like more of a 205?
It would be more 205, more NXT. I almost, and it's kind of crazy for me to say, but I'd almost, if it were up to me, I'd almost say to limit the budget so that they still have to be that kind of hungry kind of thing going on.
And it would still be extreme, just extreme matches.
It would still be extreme. Maybe, I really don't imagine WWE agreeing to every little thing from back in the day, but I think if they embrace their TVMA and remind people that parental controls exist, you could step it up, because I think there is a market for this. I'm not talking about CZW level of stuff, but I think that there's a happy medium between WWE Extreme Rules, let's say, and something you'd see in a CZW deathmatch. Somewhere in the middle, I would love to see that. I think the market's there, and I think that if you just do it, the fans will be there. I would be there. I would watch that every week. No doubt about it.
Yeah, no. And you'd almost have to have, I would assume, Paul Heyman sort of come out on one of your one-night stands and say, hey, I'm sort of passing the torch on this, because he is the mouthpiece to Brock Lesnar,
right?
Who is basically the second highest paid wrestler of all time, right behind John Cena now. And so Brock Lesnar cannot survive without Paul Heyman. Maybe, but Paul Heyman sweetens the deal quite a bit. So although you could also make the argument that Paul Heyman, Brock Lesnar wrestles 4 times a year. Paul Heyman is usually a runner backstage when Brock Lesnar's not there. So you could make the argument that actually Paul Heyman would have time to sort of be a general manager role to it. But personally, I'd like to see more of a Tommy Dreamer. He's got that ECW spirit. So he knows about booking. He knows about putting developmental talents over. So I'd probably use Tommy Dreamer in that role. I think, honestly, what I would try to do is if you want to keep it extreme championship wrestling like ECW, what I would honestly do is just take the hardcore out of it and make it goofy. So like the first ECW show I saw on Sci-Fi was perfect. Wrestler by the name of Zombie came out and cut a promo like a zombie and was an actual zombie. That was hilarious. That was really fun. I think if ECW went a goofy route, kind of like a Chikara route or something, Chikara as far as the independent wrestling show where they use a lot of luchador style type of superhero, they have more superpowers in the ring. If they went more of that route, that could maybe work. I think that's probably the direction they would want to go. I guess I would do it. I would step back on this and say I would do an ECW reboot show.
We kind of agree on some of these things. Paul Heyman would be at each of the 3 one-night stand events, and then he would introduce the first few weeks of ECW, but then he would transition to more of a Jack Tunney type role.
Okay.
Or let's say modern day Vince McMahon, where he'll show up every now and then, because yes, he is best utilized right now on Raw with Brock Lesnar. So no doubt about it. My idea was to actually have Tommy Dreamer as a co-commissioner with Sandman.
Interesting.
Their 2 clashing personalities, I think, would provide interesting story possibilities. Tommy would be the more diplomatic, more easygoing guy, where Sandman might be a little more rough edge, like good cop, bad cop type thing. Yeah, and so I'm thinking that, you have Joey Styles back as commentary with somebody new, so you get a little bit of the old and the new. We don't have any Terry Funk versus Mick Foley matches, none of like Sabu being old in wrestling. They'll make appearances, but it'll all be fresh talent. A rotating roster. Like you said, you don't want to burn out the wrestlers. There's a championship belt for singles, and then one for tag, possibly one for women's, and possibly one for women's singles and women's tag as well.
Okay.
So call me Vince, we'll work out the details. So there's that, and then I think that this could also be an opportunity to take advantage of trying new things. A lot of new match types. I'm not against the idea of these cinematic pre-taped matches like we had New Day versus the Wyatts at the Wyatt compound, or the Final Deletion, or the House of Horrors. It could be argued that the execution of a lot of these, or at least House of Horrors specifically, let's say, was less than stellar. But I think that the idea could be interesting. And I think that, can you imagine if they took advantage of their WWE Network exclusivity, where they didn't have to have a live event necessarily one week, and instead it was just, if it's an hour-long show, what if it's just cinematic pre-taped matches for that entire episode? And that could be something to try. Whether it's good for business or not, I don't know. But I'd be up for tuning in to seeing that, I don't know, Ricochet and Braun Strowman, let's say, right, fighting in a parking garage.
Yeah.
And it looks cool as hell. And they're still doing real wrestling and stuff, but it's more cinematic. I'd be willing to give that a shot at least and see how it goes. I think that could be cool. I think there's a market for it. I think El Rey does this a little bit here and there as well. So it's not like a super foreign concept.
Like Lucha Underground, yeah.
Yeah.
No, you bring up a really good point, because I think it was Beyond the Mat, the film Beyond the Mat, back, 96 or something. I think that Vince McMahon actually said in that movie, we're making movies.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it actually makes some sense there. You actually brought up a few good examples. Impact, they actually had a street fight, and it was kind of cool because it took place in like a parking lot, and they had cars circling the two opponents. Oh, and I just thought that was kind of interesting. Cool. Yeah, I think it was Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett to add gasoline to the fire. But yeah, so I always thought that was cool. But I think there is an opportunity there to expand with those things where it's like the Hardy compound or the House of Horrors. And I agree with you. I think the execution, especially on the House of Horrors, wasn't exactly there. But I think there's a huge opportunity there to make something like that work, and that could be fun, and that could actually be a huge backdrop to your ECW.
I think it's worth a try. On top of that, just going back to Shotgun Saturday Night, the early days of that, they would wrestle, I think, at Penn Station, nightclubs, bars. Why not go back to that? Like some of my favorite, in terms of hardcore matches, some of my favorite stuff is like Booker T versus Steve Austin in the supermarket. Like just wacky stuff like that. Or the APA would just like some bar somewhere, and it was just fun, and it broke it up. And if we just do an hour show once a week, I don't think it would get old. And if you rotate the roster out frequently, and maybe some people stick around to be champion for a while, I think it could be really exciting stuff.
Yeah, I think the only issue that probably comes to mind is like security. It used to be they could do these things really quickly and get in and out. Now with social media, boom, hey Facebook, Twitter, they're doing something here at O'Coogan's bar down the street. Why don't y'all come down here? Suddenly, yeah, exactly. So I wonder if that maybe comes into play. But no, that I do miss those, and especially the supermarket hardcore match between Booker T and Steve Austin, always one of my favorites.
Right,
I loved it when Booker T thought he had like left him back in the cooler, and then Austin pops out of the cooler. Yeah.
Exciting, fun stuff like that, like that goes back to like you're talking about a little more wacky,
right?
That's a little more fun without being like totally balls to the wall, like hood slam levels of zaniness.
Yep. Yeah. No. I guess the other thing too, you could probably throw in like the Dudleys. They could help out with maybe. Obviously, they run some of their own training programs as well. I also know that they've done a lot of producing with ROH and with WWE especially, so they could definitely lend a hand to all that and definitely provide some of that nostalgia. Like I said, as long as we're taking the hardcore out of it, I think I definitely would invest in something like that. I just, again, the hardcore thing, which I think ECW is the core of it is hardcore.
Yeah.
If you're going to do a true ECW reboot, you need that, and I'm going to say no to it, personally.
Right. Well, I mean, like, maybe we should define hardcore. Like, I'm not talking about, like, staple gun to the head. I guess my thing is, like, we don't necessarily need to go back to the full level fluorescent light bulb tubes,
But then why do it? Because that is a true ECW reboot. So that's where I say I think we market it. If you market it as such the way you're doing it, I think if you stick with your guns on that, then I think you have a new niche. The kind of goofiness don't make it extreme necessarily. But no, that was a good suggestion. So yeah, keep them coming. Again, Josh and Josh Talk Wrestling at gmail.com. Send us a comment, concern, a show idea. We might talk about your idea. So keep them coming, and thanks a lot. But
reach out, and if you're listening to this, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Tell a friend to subscribe.
Yeah, and thanks again for all the subscriptions. They're coming in, which is pretty cool. I mean, we appreciate the followers, subscribers, retweets, the likes, and all that we get, and we appreciate all you guys. Josh, Wrestlemania. WrestleMania is here.
WrestleMania.
So what are your thoughts about WrestleMania?
I think it's gonna be long. You know, that's the thing that's weighing on my mind the most. Is I'm almost wondering if it, like, we joke around about WrestleMania being too long. I'm really starting to wonder if this might be the one time when it really is like they've really reached that point where it is too damn long.
Well, last year they went 7 hours and 15 minutes. It started at about 4, it ended about 11:15. They're going to end at midnight this year. Me personally, like I said last podcast, what's another 45 minutes? What's another 45 minutes?
I mean, for some people, honestly, it's the difference between being awake and being asleep.
I'm going to get through it.
I'm going to be drinking a bunch of Monster Energy drinks. That's for sure.
But it'll be a long WrestleMania. But then again, that's WrestleMania, as I mentioned before, was the culmination of so many years of blood, sweat, and tears for so many people. And not just the workers, too, production crew. You know, and actually just the fans themselves. I remember when I went to my first WrestleMania, I was taken back. I was a kid all over again. It was Ford Field, WrestleMania 23. And I just remember being there and seeing, wow, this is 80,000 people. I had never been in a crowd that large.
Wow.
And it's a bit humbling on some level. It's a good humbling, but so there's that too. It's just, and kids maybe seeing WrestleMania for the first time, you hear all these stories of how Ultimate Warrior, Hogan, Edge was like, Adam Copeland was just sitting a couple rows back watching the whole thing. Who would have thought that little kid would become Edge, a WWE Hall of Famer? But that said, WrestleMania, again, it's a culmination of all these things, and it's such a beautiful thing, and I'm looking forward to it. Personally, though, I feel that it was kind of too much, then too little, then too much, and then we're sort of like a week out. I feel like it's kind of one of the earlier WrestleManias, like WrestleMania like 13, where it was the week before they booked the main event, because we have a SmackDown Women's Championship that we don't know quite yet. Now, there's a road to it. They're going to have the Fatal 4-Way and all that, but even that being said, that title has been totally invisible, and the fact that we're not going to really know until like literally less than a week before, that's one thing for like an Intercontinental title or a tag team, but this is the SmackDown's Women's Championship. To me, any way you look at it, the women's title and then the world title, men's world title, those are on the same level. And I would assume that WWE's, they've been saying it, I would assume they believe the same thing, but this act kind of makes me think otherwise.
They got to walk the talk, and it's kind of cloudy right now. It's unclear if they're walking the talk.
Well, it's interesting, and we were talking about this pre-show last week, and it was just one of those things that slipped out, but I wasn't even thinking, but for some reason we were talking about possible Asuka opponents WrestleMania, and I said Lacey Evans, and one thing I mentioned about Lacey Evans was, oh yeah, she's proved herself in and out of the ring. Well, maybe in NXT, and I mean, out of the ring, she's, a former Marine and all that, so she's definitely has a lot of great credentials, and I think she'll definitely be a force to reckon with in a good way throughout WWE in the next couple years, but she hasn't shown anything in WWE. She's shown things in NXT. She hasn't shown anything in a WWE ring. So, at this point, don't know why I said that, but I think, I think it's a good character. I think they'll keep putting her over. At the time, it's sort of the officials wanted to go that route. It's going to be Asuka Evans, but looks like they are maybe doing something else at this point. So we'll sort of see.
We'll see who's ready for Asuka, or not ready, rather.
But I mean, again, there's a lot of questions going into WrestleMania. And really, when you're trying to think and you're trying to predict about what the WrestleMania card might be, it honestly comes down to really one person. You have to build around that. That's The Undertaker.
Yeah, where's Taker? What's going on?
We know Undertaker's going to be wrestling a few months after the network special. So we already know that. He was at the Performance Center this past month, or actually this past week, rather, from what I understand. My assumption is this. My assumption is John Cena, hate him or love him, he's a future Hall of Famer. He's going to go down as one of the greatest wrestlers of all time.
Yeah, sure.
He's one of the greatest talkers of all time. They're not going to do that little buildup of last year to have a squash match with John Cena and not have a rematch. I have to assume John Cena's going to come out and make a challenge. I don't know. I mean, at this point, I don't even know if John Cena is going to be at WrestleMania. He's so far not on the card. So we'll see. But I mean, to me, my assumption would be we'd see Undertaker Cena too, but we're a week, we're 2 weeks away now. It's a Sunday. That's not a lot of time to really get a big match like that over. I mean, you don't have to do much, but it's also like the fans would kind of feel like, oh, okay, they're having this rematch, but there was really no buildup. Well, that's kind of like, it's like you just forced cake down our throats. We were forced to eat it, but we want to enjoy it. We want to enjoy that buildup, and we're not probably going to see that if it actually happens. But so that's kind of a big question. So what are your thoughts on that, Josh, about the Undertaker?
Cena Taker would make sense to come back to it, finally wrap that up. I mean, John Cena's not getting any younger. Undertaker, geez Louise, man.
When it comes comes down to Undertaker, it has always been my favorite wrestler of all time. Since I was a kid, since I was 20 years ago when I was watching during the Attitude Era, I was actually kind of ticked. I didn't like the American Badass character for the Undertaker.
No.
I wanted the Phenom, but that was the time, and I also kind of accepted it because it was the time. It was what all the wrestlers were doing. It's what they're kind of pushed that way. The sort of mysticism of wrestling was getting pulled out. There was a bit of, even though it was the Attitude Era, it was a bit of like somewhat reality until they started throwing in like the Ministry again and all that. Then that's kind of when they went back with that mysticism. It was sort of that reality Attitude Era, which now we just have the reality era. But that being said, I don't know what they're going to do. I would assume we'd see Undertaker Cena too. It would only make sense after last year's. I mean, it just, you had one of the greatest wrestlers of all time get squashed. It doesn't make sense just to like, boom, not bring it up again, right? But we'll see.
Can't just leave it. Yeah.
And it seems like Undertaker's active, and if he's going to wrestle in 2 months from now, why would he not wrestle at WrestleMania?
Good point.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
It's getting interesting with Undertaker because he's been doing some more out of character interviews, which is rare, I know.
Well, do you hear what he's charging for that? $25,000 an hour.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, that's wild.
25. And you know what? I was surprised he wasn't worth 50. I mean, Hulk Hogan at one point was doing 40.
Wow.
I mean, it was 40,000 for appearance. So I wonder if that was like, it could be 1 hour, 2 hours, but yeah, I mean, Undertaker, $25,000 an appearance. So
he's earned it, I could argue.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I don't think it was denying that, but
yeah.
So yeah, in terms of the other matches, they're looking at like about 10 so far, I think. So yeah, we talked about Asuka. Another match that I think that, people were kind of talking about was actually Samoa Joe, Rey Mysterio. Actually, there's some talk of expanding that, making that a fatal 4-way. Yeah, it's almost like it was like WrestleMania, I think 20, and I think WrestleMania 2000 maybe as well, where it was just like nothing but like fatal 4-ways, 8-person tag matches. I felt it got too fluffy. So I feel like if they do that with the U.S. title, it does two things. One, it's kind of a carbon copy of your previous pay-per-view. The previous pay-per-view was a fatal 4-way for the U.S. title. Do it again at WrestleMania. It seems like a leftover, and WrestleMania should really be fresh. So I don't know, but again, it's like it gets down to the whole, you're getting more people on the card, so it's kind of nice because from a worker's perspective, you want to be at WrestleMania. Again, talking about the culmination of your dreams and just getting a paycheck, just getting a WrestleMania bonus, for goodness sake, right? People got family. So I guess it's one of those where I don't want to see a fatal 4-way, but I would understand it if it happened. Of course, we'll have the Andre the Giant Battle Memorial Royal. The Battle Royal Memorial.
Which they've barely talked about on WWE TV. Maybe just a little bit.
Yeah, it's always interesting. It's like, for the most part, I feel that people that have won that have gone on to do things, but then I feel like Mojo Rawley, like he hasn't really done much. They've had this thing on Raw where he's talking to himself, but I mean, here we are. WrestleMania is going to happen, and unless they plan on making him a 2-time Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal winner, we won't see anything from him until after till Mania. So I wonder where the payoff is there. But then you look like Baron Corbin won, Cesaro has won, so some people have definitely won. A Big Show won, which I thought was kind of a waste. Of course we'll see AJ Styles and Randy Orton. That's going to be a great match, I think.
Sure.
I think that you're gonna have two great workers. It's gonna tell a good story. I would assume AJ Styles is gonna go over, especially considering now that he signed his contract with WWE. I would assume they're gonna put the belt back on him at some point. But given that, we've got Kofi Kingston, Daniel Bryan, right? It's gonna happen, right?
Yes, it has to happen. Kofi has to win this, otherwise I don't know what I'll do.
It kind of bothers me a little bit. Like first of all, I'm not gonna beat a dead horse. We called this back in January. We said New Day, new Daniel Bryan, WrestleMania. So we called that out. But that being said, I've always been a Kofi Kingston fan, and I mentioned before I even liked New Day in the dark days, like when no one liked New Day. Before all the unicorns and the pancakes and all that. And I mentioned before how I was only one rooting for New Day when they won the first tag team championship here in Chicago at Allstate Arena. That being said, it's going to happen. But what I don't like, what they're kind of doing with it, is it almost seems like a carbon copy of a Yeselmania. It seems like it's the same as, because you know what's going to happen on SmackDown, right? They're going to occupy SmackDown. They're going to I guarantee you, watch SmackDown this Tuesday. They're going to occupy it just like they did with Daniel Bryan, which is fine. It's going to put Kofi Kingston over, but it's not creative enough for me, and it makes it look like, honestly, it makes it look like Kofi Kingston is a poor man's Daniel Bryan. Just to be honest,
kinda like it. Yeah, like
when you regurgitate a storyline like that, that's what happens.
No, I get that, and what really gets me with the way they're presenting the Kofi Kingston one, it seems a lot more arbitrary. The management's reasons for neglecting Kofi than it does for Daniel Bryan. Like, they didn't set up the reasons as clearly, but hey, I'm still glad Kofi's getting some kind of recognition, and we'll see exactly where they go with it. But what's next on the agenda, Josh, man?
Let's talk about so more of the WrestleMania card itself. So yeah, Shane McMahon, Miz, we'll see that as well too. I think it's one of those matches we expected to happen. Honestly, it's I feel like it's one of those matches where it's going to be Shane McMahon is going to probably go over because he needs to add some legitimacy. I don't remember the last time he won a match. I really don't. And he's obviously held the European title back 15, 20 years ago in the Attitude Era. But honestly, I don't remember the last time he's actually won a match.
Well, he did technically win the World Cup.
Oh, the best of the world. Yeah, all right, whatever. But
there's an asterisk
there you go.
right there. Yeah.
Well, but you're right. I guess I completely forgot about that because it was pretty tainted.
Because it was forgettable. Yeah.
Right. But that's actually an interesting point there. But all right. But yeah, in terms of that, I could see a match going either way. It's interesting to see sort of Miz doing this kind of face turn. Of course, with the show, it helps out a lot. We're seeing him more of as a family man. He's actually earned his way, which I think a lot of people didn't really realize how much stuff he had to go through to get to where he's at. And I've always thought he's a decent worker too. I think he got a bad rep earlier on, and I think even when he was like world champion, people gave him a lot of crap. And I'm like, I still think he's a great worker. I think he gets over. I think he does a great job as a heel. He gets a lot of heat. So I always thought he delivered. But I've especially thought he's only gotten better and better as years gone on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd like to see. I mean, at this point, it'd be kind of cool to see him hold a world title. Maybe on SmackDown or Raw. I mean, it could make a lot of sense to do it on Raw. Of course, he's a USA $1 million baby now. It seems like he's got a show on there, and of course, he works with MTV quite a bit. So he's definitely becoming more of a household name, for lack of a better word.
He's really clawed his way up, and good for him.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I expected an implosion of the McMiz. I expected McMiz to explode at Fastlane, but I actually expected it to be the Miz doing the heel turn. So I was a little bit surprised that Shane, that Shane did it, but it makes sense looking back.
Right.
And I had previously mentioned I had heard some kind of rumor talk that they wanted to turn Shane heel, and they were going to use at the time they were going to use the World Cup Championship win to do that. And maybe they'll still tie that in together. Mm-hmm. But here we are.
Yeah, interesting. All right. And of course, kind of one of those, I think, sort of an elephant in the room next to Undertaker. Kurt Angle's farewell match, which wasn't very well received. That it's going to be with Baron Corbin. Personally, I mean, who else are you going to select? I guess on one hand, I would think, why not John Cena? John Cena's debut match was against Kurt Angle, so maybe Kurt Angle had his final match with John Cena, but then it gets to the whole, aren't we going to see John Cena Undertaker? So there's some interesting things that need to play out here, but officially it's going to be Baron Corbin and Kurt Angle. I was a little bit surprised, I guess, just because it was a newer storyline, and for Kurt Angle's farewell match, I guess, I don't know, I was expecting something a little bit bigger. Maybe Shawn Michaels, which, after seeing Crown Jewel, I don't think he delivered as well as he wanted to. I don't know. I just thought that Angle and Baron Corbin, I just thought that was really interesting. Again, it's Baron Corbin is decent. I know a lot of people, I shouldn't say this, but I've heard some don't like him. I'm sure there's some that love every wrestler, some that hate every wrestler.
Sure.
At the end of the day. But I've never hated Baron Corbin. I mean, it wasn't really his fault that he ruined Monday Night Raw. That was just poor ratings. It was poor creative is what led to that.
They dumped. Well, he just served as a stand-in for Vince, essentially.
Right. Exactly. As the constable, but and then I guess the acting general manager. But yeah, even that being said, yeah. I mean, even that being said, this is just a newer storyline that just came from like 3 months ago. And I just thought, if you're having a farewell match and you're using a storyline from the past 3 months, it seems kind of weird. You want something a little more nostalgic, I think.
Unless it's a work,
Well, that's the thing. It could also be a work, and it sounds like there was a lot of blowback from fans, but I don't know. Who okay, so if it is a work, who are they going to swap it out with?
Get Daniel Puder.
Yeah, so I don't know. I personally...
Somebody from his past that's not, like you said, from 3 months ago. I don't know who, though.
We'll see. I mean, it's interesting. We'll see. What else we got? So we got, of course, Triple H versus Batista, which that'll be a fun way to close it out. And I think Batista won this match as a nice way to go out, put Triple H over. From a nostalgia standpoint, it'll be fun to see. I'm not overly excited about this match. It's one of those where Triple H can make anyone look good, but nothing against Dave Batista. I think he definitely made his mark, but he's going to have some ring rust, and he's been a while since he's been in the ring. He's going to return at WrestleMania. Your nerves and whatnot, your nerves and all that are gonna be off and all that. So it's just interesting, and of course your coordination. So really your nerves and coordination are gonna be off and all that. But so I don't know. It could be. I think it'll be a fun match to watch. Of course, we've got the 205 finals, Buddy Murphy and Tony Nese. I would assume Buddy Murphy's gonna go over here, but why not? Why not Tony Nese? But I could see either one going over, I guess. But my assumption would be Buddy Murphy will continue to hold this title.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. We'll also see, of course, our big main events: the Universal Championship as well as the Raw Women's Championship. Yeah, I mean, we'll talk. I know we're talking a lot of predictions now, but personally, I see Brock Lesnar going over Seth Rollins.
If I'm being like super honest, really don't care anymore right now about this particular match. I just, as when Rollins won the Royal Rumble, I was like, I like Rollins, don't get me wrong, guys, but I don't know, like, what's the point? Like, he's like, Rollins is not going to beat Lesnar. Like, I talked about this in the last podcast. They've built up Lesnar to this mythical figure, this height, this mountain that you got to climb. Like, no one on the current roster can do that because they're not sold that way. Like I said, it's almost going to have to be like somebody out of left field, some dark horse just comes out of nowhere from some other promotion or somebody, and like, I don't know, Kenny Omega, and that's the only way that anybody's going to be able to legitimately beat Brock. Well, legitimately is maybe not the word, but to satisfyingly defeat Brock Lesnar. Like, if Rollins were to just beat him, it just wouldn't make any sense to me.
Well, the problem is that as long as Roman Reigns is the big dog, if anyone else beats Brock Lesnar cleanly, that doesn't put Roman Reigns over.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that bugs me about wrestling being predetermined in such a way, because there's so much psychology that, you know, after a while you just pick up on it.
Yep.
You lose some of the surprises. You know that certain things aren't going to happen unless they want to really swerve you, which does happen every now and then. But it's too much. It's too bad that we can kind of predict certain things.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you know, back to your point with you know, just to kind of loop back to the Brock Lesnar, Seth Rollins thing. If Seth Rollins beats Brock Lesnar cleanly, that actually, he goes over Roman Reigns as well, which is what I don't think the WWE wants to do. I think they want to make it where Roman Reigns, this is still his yard, he is still the big dog, and the only way to do that is to make him the only guy that can get over Brock Lesnar. But hey, we'll see, right?
Yeah, probably.
We'll see. But then we're left with what is told to be, what is potentially said to be our main event, and that is the triple threat match with Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte Flair, which on all accounts looks like we would expect Becky to get Charlotte Flair in the disarmor and make her tap. I don't think that we'd see Ronda Rousey get pinned or tapped. Although you could always see a swerve of like Charlotte Flair out of nowhere picking up a victory over Becky Lynch as well too.
Maybe, but I don't know. I feel like they'd want to just let Becky have it, let that momentum come to fruition.
Especially considering it's WrestleMania. Yep.
I mean, it would definitely swerve us. It would definitely be a surprise if Charlotte won, or even Ronda or somebody else. But yeah, I'm going to give it to Becky.
I wouldn't think that. But then again, you know, we don't know this whole thing with Ronda Rousey. This swerve they've done with her character. It's interesting because you mentioned it last week, Josh. Sometimes in wrestling, you actually lose sight. It's like the movie Inception. You lose sight of what reality is. Like, is this a work? Is this what's going on?
Yeah.
And it's you know, it's one of those things where this character kind of Ronda Rousey came from a lot of the things she said. But who's to say Vince McMahon didn't tell her, hey, why don't you go ahead and say this? Here's how we're going to work this. And this way they've established, because they've done a great job with the triple threat for the Raw Women's title. We've got three distinct characters. You know, you've got sort of the raw, rugged, the overachiever that, you know, that's always been like underrated, Becky Lynch.
Yeah.
And then you got the golden child, Charlotte. And then you've got you've got Ronda Rousey coming in, and it's kind of like, what do you do with her? So they've made this angle of her where she's sort of this anti-hero, but she's also realistic. They give her liberties to break the fourth wall, kind of almost like a CM Punk-esque type of character.
A little bit. I'm a little mixed on that. Her promos, her talking, literally just straight up saying wrestling is fake.
Well, that's the stuff that kind of bothers me. It's like, well, we don't really say fake. We say it's predetermined.
Yeah.
But then again, you don't know, is it to get heat? Did Vince McMahon tell her to say that? Was she produced that way? I don't know. My assumption was no, because anyone that actually has respect for the business would not say that. But then again, it could be a work to get some heat. You never know.
I feel like that if WWE had decreed such a thing, they could do it more subtly. Like every now and then, like back in the day, there was a storyline with the Undertaker going off the rails, and I remember Vince coming into the ring. He's saying, "Now, Mark, you do little subtle things. You know, my name is Joe, not Roman. You do like little subtle things to give you just a slight little peek that we know this isn't quite, we're characters and stuff, but it doesn't go all the way. You know what I'm saying? They'll say these people are characters or this is a little bit embellished, but they'll never go full hog and just say this is fake. Right. Wrestling is fake. That's where I agree with you, where it's a little too much, just a little too much, where it's just like, why are you doing this? Like, why are we here then? Imagine if you're watching Game of Thrones and then Arya Stark's just like, hi everybody, it's all fake, no one was beheaded. You don't want that. You're not here for that, really. Right.
Well, like, we know it's predetermined, but that it kind of takes the illusion away a little bit. And then the other thing too, it's just, you don't want to hear your champion saying things like, hey, I like this job, but I don't need it.
Yeah.
You're gonna dock my paycheck, blah blah. Well, that of course is like more storyline, but it's like you almost don't want to hear those things. But
even from a heel, it doesn't work. I don't know.
Well, yeah. But I mean, here at the end of the day, day, though, it's generating heat, which is what a heel is supposed to do. So
It is.
taking some liberties, taking some low-hanging fruit, the sort of low, forbidden hanging fruit, so to speak. But hey, it's working nonetheless. But hey, I'm looking forward, though, to WrestleMania. Again, like always, being that spoke in a clock that turns it to another revolution. It's going to be a long show, but it'll be a great show. Definitely see some things that are awesome, seeing some people get over, and then we'll be booing about some of the things that didn't happen that should have.
Always,
carrying all through pre and post WrestleMania weekend. But that's our right as wrestling fans. So yeah, Josh, anything else you want to add, man?
Subscribe.
Yeah, no, please. And we actually got a few more subscribers. So yeah, thanks again for checking us out. Subscribe to us. Have your friends subscribe. Follow us. Like our stuff on Instagram, Facebook. We do it all. And shoot us some comments. Again, Josh and Josh Talk Wrestling at gmail.com. And now have a great WrestleMania season, y'all.
Have a good one, everybody.
Laters.